The autumn wind cut through Clara Bennett's worn traveling dress as she stood at the edge of the forest trail, staring at the empty clearing where her mare should have been. 3 days into her journey from Santa Fe to her sister's homestead in Colorado, and now this, her horse had broken its tether during the night and vanished into the wilderness. She pressed trembling fingers against her temples, fighting back tears that had nothing to do with the cold. Without that horse, she had no way to carry her meager supplies, no way to cover the remaining 100 miles through increasingly hostile territory. The dried venison and hardtack in her saddlebags might last a week if she rationed carefully, but walking through mountain passes in October was a death sentence. Her hands shook as she pulled the thin gold band from her finger, her mother's wedding ring, the last piece of her old life in Boston. Perhaps she could trade it at the nearest trading post for another horse, or at least passage on a wagon train. The ring caught the morning sunlight, and Clara felt her throat tighten. "Mama, I'm so sorry, but survival demanded sacrifice, and she'd already sacrificed too much to let pride stop her now." Before we continue with Clara's journey, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and leave a like on this video. Your support truly motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. Where are you listening from today? Let us know in the comments below. She was studying the barely visible trail markers when she heard it, the steady crunch of boots on pine needles. Clara's hand flew to the small pistol in her coat pocket, her heart hammering against her ribs. The figure that emerged from the tree line made her breath catch. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to fill the narrow path. Thick, dark hair fell past his collar, and a full beard couldn't hide the strong line of his jaw. He wore buckskin pants and a heavy, fur-lined coat, a rifle slung across his back, with the casual ease of a man who'd carried weapons since childhood. But it was his eyes that held her, deep brown, assessing her with an intelligence that made her straighten her spine despite her exhaustion. "You look like you're in a bad way, ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble that somehow didn't frighten her. "That your camp back there with no horse in sight?" Clara lifted her chin, willing her voice not to shake. "My mare broke loose during the night. I'm heading to the Gunnison Valley, to my sister's homestead. I can pay—" She held out the ring, hating how desperate she sounded. "This is real gold. For a horse, or even just help getting to the next settlement." The mountain man stepped closer, and Clara noticed the way he moved, deliberate, unthreatening, like someone accustomed to calming, skittish animals. He glanced at the ring, but didn't reach for it. Instead, his gaze traveled over her thin dress, her worn boots, the way she favored her left foot from yesterday's blister. "Gold doesn't mean much up here," he said quietly, "but a woman alone in these mountains means everything." He met her eyes, and she saw something unexpected there, respect, not pity. "Name's Jacob Thorne. I've got a cabin about 8 miles north. And I know every trail between here and Gunnison. You're welcome to shelter there while we figure out your situation. No payment necessary." Clara searched his face for deception, for the predatory gleam she'd learned to recognize in men's eyes. She found none. "I don't accept charity, Mr. Thorne. Not charity, common sense." He gestured toward the darkening sky. "Storm's coming before nightfall. You won't survive it out here, and I won't sleep knowing I left you to freeze." His expression softened slightly. "I've got a sister myself, somewhere back east. I'd hope someone would help her if she was in trouble." Something in his tone, the understated sincerity, the absence of expectations, made Clara's defenses waver. She'd been running for 3 months. Ever since she'd fled her father's house and his plans to marry her off to Harrison Whitmore, a man twice her age with a reputation for violence. Every instinct she'd honed screamed at her to trust no one, But Jacob Thorne's steady gaze held a quality she hadn't encountered in years: honor. "I can work," she said finally, slipping the ring back onto her finger. "I'm an excellent cook, and I can mend, clean, handle livestock." "Can you shoot?" The question startled her. "Yes, my brother taught me before he went to war." Jacob nodded as if this confirmed something. "Then you'll earn your keep teaching me how to make proper biscuits. Mine turn out hard enough to break teeth." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. "Come on, we need to move before the weather turns." He helped her gather her scattered belongings, handling her worn carpet bag with the same care he'd given his rifle. As they walked, Clara found herself stealing glances at this enigmatic man. He moved through the forest like part of it, reading signs in bent grass and broken twigs that were invisible to her. Every few minutes he'd pause, listening to sounds she couldn't distinguish from the wind. "How long have you lived in these mountains?" she asked, partly from curiosity, partly to break the unnerving silence. 7 years. Came out after the war ended." He didn't elaborate, but she heard the weight behind those words, the same weight she carried when she thought about Boston, about the life she'd left behind. "Were you at Gettysburg? Bull Run, Antietam, Chattanooga?" His jaw tightened. "Lost most of my company at Antietam. Figured the mountains were a better place for a man who'd seen too much death." Clara understood that sentiment more than he knew. She'd seen death too, though not on a battlefield: her mother's slow decline, her brother's name on a casualty list, the bruises on the housemaid who'd tried to refuse her father's friend. Violence wore many faces. "I'm lost without my horse," she admitted quietly, surprising herself with the honesty. It wasn't just about the animal. It was about the last thread of independence, the carefully laid plan that was unraveling with each passing hour. Jacob stopped walking and turned to face her fully. In the fading afternoon light, his expression was impossibly gentle for such a hard-looking man. "Then get lost with me," he said simply. "I know the way." The words settled into Clara's chest like warm stones. For the first time in months, the constant knot of anxiety in her stomach loosened slightly. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and they continued through the darkening forest. Jacob's cabin appeared as the first snowflakes began to fall, a solid structure of hewn logs with a stone chimney and a small barn attached. Smoke already rose from the chimney. He must have banked the fire before leaving that morning. He held the door open for her, and Clara stepped into surprising warmth and order. The single room was clean, with a stone fireplace, a wide bed in one corner, and a table with 2 chairs near the window. Shelves lined one wall, stocked with preserved foods and supplies. A bearskin rug covered most of the floor. "You take the bed," Jacob said, already moving to stoke the fire. "I'll sleep in the loft." He pointed to a ladder leading to a small platform above the main room. "There's a wash basin behind that screen, and clean water in the barrel by the door. Make yourself comfortable." Clara watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements, the way he'd created a genuine home in this isolated place. "Mr. Thorne?" "Jacob. Jacob, I need you to understand something." She waited until he looked at her. "I ran away from Boston because my father tried to force me into a marriage with a cruel man. If anyone comes looking for me, a well-dressed man named Harrison Whitmore, or riders asking about a young woman traveling alone, I need you to say you haven't seen me." Jacob's expression hardened. "Any man who forces a woman into anything won't get truth from me or hospitality." He crossed to a trunk in the corner and pulled out a heavy wool blanket, which he draped over her shoulders. "You're safe here, Clara. I give you my word." The storm that had been threatening arrived with full force after dark, transforming the gentle snowfall into a howling blizzard. Clara sat at the table, helping Jacob clean and oil his various tools while the wind screamed outside. She found herself relaxing in the companionable silence, the steady rhythm of work soothing in its normalcy. "How far is Gunnison from here?" she asked eventually. "About 80 miles as the crow flies, but closer to 100 on safe trails. The direct routes are too dangerous this time of year, Ute hunting grounds, and they don't take kindly to trespassers." He set down the knife he'd been sharpening. "If the weather clears, we could make it in about a week on foot. Less if we can locate your horse, or I can trade for another one at the fort." A week. Clara's voice came out smaller than she intended. A week, alone with this man, depending on his goodwill, his protection. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt an unfamiliar sense of possibility. "You're worried," Jacob observed, not unkindly. "I'm always worried lately." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. "I've been looking over my shoulder for 3 months, wondering when my father's men will catch up to me, wondering if I'll make it to Eleanor before winter, wondering if she'll even want me after all these years." "Eleanor's your sister," Clara nodded. "We haven't seen each other since she married Thomas 5 years ago. She wrote that they have a homestead now, that there's room for me if I need it, but that was 6 months ago. What if she's moved? What if something's happened?" The fears she'd been suppressing tumbled out. "I have no other plan, Jacob. If I can't find her, I have nowhere to go." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The gesture was brief but grounding. "One problem at a time. Tonight you're warm and safe. Tomorrow the storm might pass. Next week we find your sister." His thumb brushed across her knuckles before he withdrew. "You're not alone anymore, Clara. Not while you're under my roof." The simple declaration made her throat tight with emotion. She'd been alone for so long, carrying the weight of her decisions in solitude. To have someone offer support without conditions felt almost dangerous, like something she could become dependent on, something that could be taken away. That night, lying in Jacob's bed while he slept in the loft, Clara stared at the dancing shadows cast by the firelight and wondered what kind of man inspired such immediate trust. She'd been raised to be wary, taught that men took what they wanted, that her value lay only in her beauty and the connections her marriage could bring. Jacob Thorne defied every lesson she'd learned. He'd offered shelter without expectation, respect without condition. And when he'd looked at her earlier, she'd seen something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Recognition, as if he understood what it meant to run from an unbearable past toward an uncertain future. The storm lasted 3 days. During that time, Clara and Jacob fell into a rhythm that felt startlingly domestic. She cooked meals from his well-stocked pantry, venison stew, cornbread, apple preserves he'd put up last fall. He taught her to maintain the fire efficiently, to read the signs of changing weather, to load and clean his various firearms. In the evenings, they talked, sharing stories carefully edited to avoid the rawest wounds. She learned that he'd been a schoolteacher before the war, that he'd grown up in Pennsylvania with 2 sisters and a brother, that he'd come west because the mountains didn't carry ghosts from the battlefield. He learned that she'd been engaged once before her father's scheme, to a kind young man who died of fever, that she played piano, that she dreamed of teaching music to children someday, somewhere she could breathe freely. "You never wanted to remarry?" she asked one evening, watching him carve a piece of wood into what looked like a bird. Jacob's hands stilled. "I was married. Sarah. She died bringing our daughter into the world. The baby didn't survive either." His voice remained steady, but Clara heard the carefully controlled grief beneath. "That was 8 years ago, before I enlisted. I made a promise then that I wouldn't let myself care that deeply again. Losing them nearly destroyed me." Clara's chest ached with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Jacob. Life's hard out here. You learn to accept what you can't change." He resumed carving, and she recognized the gesture for what it was, a retreat from painful territory. She rose and moved to sit beside him on the bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Accepting and healing aren't the same thing. He looked at her then, really looked, and Clara saw past the mountain man exterior to the wounded soul beneath. You're not property, Clara. You're a person with dreams and worth that has nothing to do with what some man decides. I hope you know that. The words cracked something open inside her. I'm starting to, she whispered. On the fourth morning, Clara woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of Jacob chopping wood outside. She dressed quickly and stepped into a world transformed, everything coated in pristine white, the sky a brilliant blue, the air so cold and clear it hurt to breathe. Jacob paused when he saw her, axe balanced on his shoulder, and smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it changed his entire face from stern to almost boyish. "Beautiful morning," he said. "It is." Clara hugged herself against the cold. "Does this mean we can travel?" "In a day or two, once the passes are safe. But first, I need to teach you something." He set down the axe and walked to the barn, returning with a magnificent buckskin gelding. "This is Ranger. If we're going to travel together, you need to know how to ride without a saddle in case of emergency." The lessons began that afternoon. Jacob was patient but firm, correcting her posture, teaching her to grip with her knees, to move with the horse rather than against it. She fell twice, both times into snowdrifts, and both times he was there to help her up, his large hands steady on her waist. "You're doing well," he said after the second fall. "Better than I expected for someone who learned to ride in a city park." Clara brushed snow from her skirt, laughing despite herself. "I'm a disaster. You're brave." He didn't release her waist immediately, and Clara became acutely aware of his closeness, the warmth radiating from his body, the way his breath created small clouds in the cold air. Most people would have given up by now. "I can't afford to give up." But the words came out softer than she intended, and she found herself swaying slightly toward him. Jacob's expression shifted. Something heated, replacing the gentle amusement. His hands tightened fractionally on her waist. "Clara!" The moment shattered as Ranger whinnied and stamped, startled by something in the tree line. Jacob released her instantly, his hand going to the pistol at his hip as he scanned the forest. "Get behind me." Clara obeyed without question, her heart hammering. "What is it?" "Riders, 3 of them coming from the South Trail." His voice had gone flat, dangerous. "Get inside, bar the door. Don't open it unless you hear my voice." "Jacob, I won't leave you. Now, Clara." He turned just enough to meet her eyes, and what she saw there made her obey. Not fear, but absolute determination. "Trust me." She ran to the cabin, barred the door, and grabbed the rifle Jacob had taught her to load. Through the window, she watched 3 men emerge from the forest on horseback. Even from a distance, she recognized the quality of their horses, the cut of their clothes. These weren't trappers or traders. These were men with money and purpose. The lead rider, tall, thin, with a narrow face, called out, "We're looking for someone." A young woman traveling alone, probably on foot by now, her family's offering a reward for information. Jacob stood perfectly still, his rifle held loosely, but ready. "Lots of folks travel through these mountains. What's she to you?" "Her father's concerned for her safety. She left Boston under difficult circumstances. We just want to help her get home." Even through the thick log walls, Clara could hear the lie in the man's voice. That was no concerned family representative. That was one of Harrison Whitmore's men, who paid to track her down and drag her back. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the rifle. Jacob's response was measured, cold. "Haven't seen any woman traveling alone. If I do, I'll be sure she knows her family's looking for her. But I'll also make sure she knows she's got a choice about whether to go back." He shifted his stance slightly, and suddenly the casual mountain man became something far more dangerous. "A woman's entitled to make her own decisions out here. We respect that." The thin man's expression hardened. "You're interfering with family business, friend." "I'm protecting a woman's right to not be found if she doesn't want to be found." Jacob's voice dropped lower. "And I'm not your friend. You've got 5 seconds to turn those horses around before I decide you're trespassing on my property with hostile intent." For a long moment, Clara thought they would fight. Her finger found the trigger guard, ready to shoot if necessary. But something in Jacob's absolute stillness, the way he held his rifle, the scars visible on his hands, something communicated that this was not a man who bluffed. The thin man wheeled his horse around. "Her father will hear about this. There are laws, and they don't apply to a woman who's run away from abuse." Jacob took a single step forward. "If I see you on my land again, we'll have a different conversation. Now ride." They rode. Clara watched until they disappeared into the trees, then sank onto the bed, her whole body shaking with reaction. The bar scraped as Jacob lifted it from outside, and then he was there, crossing the room in 3 strides, pulling her against his chest. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you. You're safe." Clara clung to him, her fingers digging into his coat. "They found me. Harrison sent them, Jacob. If they come back—" "They won't." His arms tightened around her. "And if they do, they'll learn that some promises are worth fighting for." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands framing her cheeks. "I told you, you're not alone. I meant it. If you want to go to your sister, I'll get you there. If you want to hide here until spring, we'll figure it out. But I won't let anyone force you into anything, not while I'm breathing." The fierce protectiveness in his voice undid her. Clara had spent her entire life being told what to do, where to go, who to be. Jacob's offer of choice, of partnership, was more precious than any gold. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this for me?" Jacob's expression softened, and he traced his thumb across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Because when I look at you, I see a woman worth protecting, worth knowing, worth—" He trailed off, as if he'd said too much, and stepped back. "We should prepare to leave at first light. Those men will report back and more might come." But Clara caught his hand before he could retreat further. "Worth what, Jacob?" He looked at their joined hands, then at her face, and something in his carefully controlled expression cracked. "Worth breaking my promise for," he said roughly. "Worth caring about even though I swore I wouldn't let myself feel this way again." Clara's breath caught. "I feel it too. This connection. I didn't think I could trust anyone again after what I've been through. But I trust you. Completely. Clara." Her name was a warning and a plea. "You're vulnerable right now. You've been through hell. The last thing you need is what? Someone who sees me as a person instead of property. Someone who asks what I want instead of telling me?" She moved closer, lifting her free hand to his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath her palm. "I know what I'm feeling, Jacob, and I know it's fast, maybe too fast, but nothing about my life has been normal for months. Why should this be any different?" He caught her wrist, but didn't push her away. "Because I'm not a good bet. I live alone in the mountains. I've got more ghosts than future. You deserve someone who can give you the life you dreamed about, music lessons, children, a real home, in a real town." "I dreamed about being free," Clara said fiercely. "I dreamed about being valued for who I am, not what I can provide. I dreamed about feeling safe enough to breathe." She pressed closer until they were separated by inches. "You've given me that in 4 days. Maybe you're exactly what I need." Jacob's control broke. He bent his head and kissed her, not gently, not tentatively, but with a desperate hunger that matched her own. Clara melted into him, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, her body molding against the hard planes of his. He tasted like pine smoke and coffee, like safety and danger all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "Go slow," he murmured. "I don't want to hurt you. After what you've been through, you could never hurt me." Clara kissed him again, softer this time. "You're the opposite of everything that's hurt me." They left at dawn, traveling light and fast through terrain that terrified Clara with its brutal beauty. Jacob led them along trails that seemed to appear only when they needed them, always alert for signs of pursuit. He taught her to move quietly, to read tracks, to sense when something was wrong. At night, they huddled together for warmth, their bodies fitting together as if designed for it. On the third day of travel, they stopped at a small trading fort to gather supplies and information. Jacob traded furs for ammunition and dried goods, while Clara waited in the shadows, her hood pulled low. She was examining a display of medicine bottles when she heard it. Harrison Whitmore's voice, distinctive and cruel, coming from the fort's main room. A woman, about 22 years old, dark hair, traveling alone, or possibly with a mountain man. There's a $500 reward for information leading to her recovery. Clara's blood turned to ice. He was here. Harrison himself had come west. Jacob must have sensed her fear because he was suddenly beside her, his hand on the small of her back. "Stay calm," he whispered. "I'll handle this." But Clara couldn't let him face this alone. She'd spent too long running, letting others fight her battles. Before Jacob could stop her, she stepped into the main room, her chin raised despite her thundering heart. Harrison Whitmore looked exactly as she remembered, impeccably dressed, coldly handsome, with eyes like a snake. Those eyes widened when they saw her. "Clara, thank God. Your father has been worried sick." "Liar." The word came out steady, strong. "My father sold me to you like livestock. I'm not going back." Harrison's expression hardened. "You're confused, darling. The journey has been difficult, but I'm here now to take you home where you belong." "She belongs wherever she chooses," Jacob said quietly, moving to stand beside Clara. "And she's chosen not to be with you." Harrison's gaze swept over Jacob with contempt. "And what are you? Some unwashed savage who's taken advantage of a vulnerable woman. I'm the man who'll kill you if you try to touch her." The fort went silent. Even the rough trappers and traders sensed the shift from posturing to genuine threat. Harrison's hand moved toward his coat, but Jacob was faster. His pistol appeared in his hand with practiced ease, aimed directly at Harrison's chest. "Don't," Jacob said softly. "Walk away. Tell her father she's dead if you want, or tell him she's never coming back. But understand this, if you follow us, if you send more men, if I ever see your face again, I'll make sure it's the last thing you see." Harrison's face flushed with rage. "You can't threaten me. I have connections, lawyers, and I have 100 miles of wilderness where bodies disappear." Jacob's tone remained conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Your choice." For a long moment, the outcome hung in balance. Then Harrison stepped back, his hands raised in surrender, though his eyes burned with fury. "This isn't over." "Yes," Clara said clearly. "It is. I'm not your property, Harrison. I never was. And if you truly cared about me at all, you'd respect that I'm choosing a different life." They left the fort quickly, not stopping, until they'd put 10 miles between them and any possible pursuit. When Jacob finally called a halt in a protected canyon, Clara practically fell from Ranger's back, adrenaline giving way to shaking exhaustion. "That was incredibly stupid and incredibly brave," Jacob said, pulling her into his arms. "Don't ever scare me like that again." Clara buried her face against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "I couldn't let you face him alone. I needed to show him, and myself, that I wasn't afraid anymore." "You showed him." Jacob kissed the top of her head. "You showed everyone in that fort that you're stronger than anyone who tries to break you." He tilted her face up to his. I've never been more proud of anyone in my life." The kiss that followed was different from the others. Tender, reverent, full of promises neither of them had dared to voice yet. When they made camp that night, Jacob spread his bedroll beside hers instead of at a careful distance. "Stay close," he murmured, pulling her against him. "I need to know you're safe." Clara nestled into the curve of his body, his arm heavy and protective across her waist. "Jacob, what happens when we reach Gunnison? When we find Eleanor?" She felt him tense. "What do you want to happen?" "I want—" Clara turned to face him in the darkness, finding his eyes by touch more than sight. "I want to stay with you, if you'll have me. I know it's fast. I know I'm asking a lot. But yes." The word was immediate, absolute. "Yes, Clara, stay with me. Help me turn that lonely cabin into a real home. Teach music if you want, tend horses if you want, or just exist without anyone telling you what to do." His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing. "Together. That's what I want. Together." The word wrapped around Clara's heart like a warm blanket. "Together," she echoed. They reached the outskirts of Gunnison 5 days later. Jacob waited with the horses while Clara approached the small homestead with Eleanor's name on the deed. Her sister answered the door, older, more weathered, but with the same warm brown eyes Clara remembered. "Clara?" Eleanor's voice broke. "Oh my God, Clara, we thought, come inside, Thomas. Thomas, it's Clara." Over cups of strong coffee, Clara told her story, the abbreviated version that focused on escape rather than trauma, on Jacob's help rather than her terror. Eleanor and Thomas listened with growing horror and respect. "You can stay here as long as you need," Eleanor said firmly. "We have room, and Thomas could use help with the horses. Clara, you're safe now." Clara glanced through the window at Jacob, who was tending to Ranger with his characteristic patience. "I know. But Eleanor, I'm not planning to stay. I'm going back to the mountains, with Jacob." Eleanor followed her gaze, and understanding dawned on her face. "You love him." "I do. I know it's fast. I know it seems crazy. It seems like you finally found someone who treats you the way you deserve to be treated." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Are you sure? Mountain life is hard, Clara. Isolated, nothing like Boston. Boston tried to kill my spirit. Jacob helped me remember I have one." Clara met her sister's eyes. "I'm sure." They stayed in Gunnison for 2 weeks, long enough for Clara to reconnect with her sister, to help with the horses Thomas was training, to feel truly safe for the first time in months. Jacob found work helping to build a new barn, his strength and skill earning respect from the other settlers. In the evenings, Clara and Eleanor would sit by the fire, catching up on years of separation, while Jacob and Thomas played chess in companionable silence. But as the days passed, Clara felt the pull of the mountains, of the cabin that had become home, of the life she and Jacob could build together. On a clear November morning, she told Eleanor it was time to leave. "I'll write," Clara promised, hugging her sister tight, "and we'll visit in the spring, but my place is with him now." "I know." Eleanor pulled back, her eyes bright with tears. "Be happy, Clara. You've earned it." The journey back to Jacob's cabin took only 5 days. They knew the trails now, moved with the confidence of experience. When the familiar structure came into view, Clara felt a rush of homecoming that surprised her with its intensity. This rough cabin in the wilderness felt more like home than the Boston mansion ever had. Jacob helped her down from Ranger, his hands lingering on her waist. "Welcome home," he said softly. "Home," Clara agreed, and kissed him. That night, as snow began to fall again, Jacob knelt beside the fire and pulled a small wooden box from his pocket. Clara's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple gold band, "It's not fancy," he said. "I made it myself from gold I panned from the creek. But Clara Bennett, I'm asking if you'll marry me, not because you need protection or shelter, but because I love you, because these past weeks have shown me what life can be when you find the right person, because I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life and see your face." Clara dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, Jacob, I'll marry you. I love you. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved." He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and pulled her into his arms. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the firelight, two wounded souls who'd found healing in each other. The next morning they rode to the nearest mission, where a traveling minister married them in a simple ceremony with two trappers as witnesses. Clara wore her best dress and carried wildflowers Jacob had somehow found despite the snow. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache with joy. Their first year together was hard. Mountain winters tested even the most prepared souls. But Clara learned, adapted, grew strong in ways she'd never imagined. She taught music to the handful of children at the fort, earning enough to buy supplies they couldn't make themselves. Jacob expanded the cabin, adding a second room, building furniture with the same careful attention he gave everything. They learned each other's rhythms, how to work together, how to give each other space when needed and comfort when sought. In the spring, a letter arrived from Eleanor. She was pregnant, due in the fall. Clara cried with joy and immediately began knitting blankets. She and Jacob made the journey to Gunnison in time for the birth, and Clara held her nephew with awe, imagining the family she and Jacob might create someday. That summer, a young woman appeared at their cabin, running from a similar situation to Clara's, an arranged marriage to an abusive man, no money, no options. Jacob looked at Clara, and she nodded without hesitation. They sheltered the girl for 3 weeks, then helped her reach California where she had distant cousins. She was the first, but not the last. Over the years, their cabin became a known, safe haven for women fleeing bad situations, a station on an informal network of protection. 2 years after their marriage, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Jacob's first wife. It was Clara's idea, a gesture of respect for the woman who'd shaped the man she loved. Jacob cried when she suggested it, and Clara knew they'd honored something important. 3 years later, a son arrived, Daniel, and their cabin rang with the sounds of childhood. Clara never forgot where she came from, never took for granted the freedom she'd found. She taught her children, and the steady stream of women who passed through their home, that they were worth more than what others decided, that true strength came from choosing your own path. On their 10th anniversary, Jacob took her to a meadow high in the mountains, where wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Giving up city life, music schools, all the things you could have had?" Clara looked at him, this man who'd given her everything that truly mattered, and smiled. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I was lost without my horse that day, lost in every way that counted, and you were right. You knew the way to myself, to freedom, to love. You knew the way home." Jacob pulled her close, and they stood together in the mountain silence, two souls who'd found their way through the wilderness to each other. The winter of their 3rd year together came early and fierce. By mid-October, snow had already buried the lower trails, and the temperature dropped so low that water froze in the cabin within minutes of being brought inside. Clara stood at the window, watching Jacob split wood in the grey dawn light, his breath creating clouds that hung in the still air. Even after 3 years of marriage, the sight of him made her heart skip. The way his muscles flexed under his wool shirt, the intense concentration on his face, the quiet competence in every movement. She pressed a hand to her belly, where their 3rd child grew. She hadn't told him yet, wanting to be absolutely certain before she shared the news. After Sarah and Daniel, she knew the signs well enough. The bone-deep exhaustion, the way certain smells made her stomach turn, the tenderness in her breasts. This baby would be born in late spring, just as the mountains came alive again. The door opened, bringing a blast of frigid air, and Jacob, his arms full of split wood. "Getting colder," he said, stacking the logs by the fireplace. "We might be snowed in for a few weeks if this keeps up." He turned to her, his expression shifting to concern. "You're pale. Are you feeling all right?" Clara smiled, crossing to him. "I'm fine, better than fine, actually. Jacob, I have something to tell you." The sound of gunshots echoed through the valley, distant but unmistakable. Jacob's entire body went rigid. In one fluid motion, he grabbed his rifle from above the door and moved to the window. "Stay with the children," he said, his voice taking on the flat, dangerous tone Clara recognized from their encounter at the fort years ago. "Jacob, what is it?" Those shots came from the Morrison homestead, 3 miles east. He was already pulling on his heavy coat, checking his ammunition. Tom Morrison's wife, Mary, is 8 months pregnant. If someone's in trouble, then we go together. Clara was already moving toward the children's room, where Sarah and Daniel still slept. She woke them gently, brought them to the main room, and settled them by the fire with strict instructions to stay inside. Sarah, now 8 years old and frighteningly perceptive, grabbed her mother's hand. "Mama, is someone hurt?" "We don't know yet, sweetheart. That's why Papa and I need to check. You're in charge until we get back. Keep your brother warm and safe." Clara kissed her daughter's forehead, then turned to Jacob. "I can shoot as well as you can now. You taught me. We're stronger together." Jacob's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Bring the Winchester. And Clara, if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments." They made the journey in tense silence, their horses struggling through snow that reached their knees. The Morrison cabin came into view, and Clara's stomach dropped. The front door hung open, moving slightly in the wind. No smoke rose from the chimney. Blood stained the snow near the entrance. Jacob dismounted, gesturing for Clara to stay back. But as he approached the cabin, a figure stumbled out. Tom Morrison, blood streaming from a wound on his head, his face contorted with terror and rage. "They took her," he gasped, nearly collapsing. "4 men. They shot me, thought I was dead. They took Mary, said something about a reward, about someone looking for a pregnant woman hiding in the mountains." Clara's blood ran cold. "Harrison," she whispered. "After all this time, he's still looking for me." Tom's eyes focused on her with difficulty. They kept saying they'd gotten a tip about a woman matching the description. Dark hair, living in the mountains, but they took Mary by mistake. "Clara, she's 8 months pregnant. She can't survive." "How long ago?" Jacob's voice cut through Tom's panic like a blade. 20 minutes, maybe less. They headed south toward Dead Man's Pass. Jacob turned to Clara, his expression terrible in its controlled fury. "Take Tom back to our cabin. Get Doc Patterson from the fort if you can. I'm going after them." "No!" Clara stepped forward. "We're going after them. Together. You said it yourself. I can shoot. I can ride. And this is my fault, Jacob. They took Mary because of me. It's not your fault that Harrison Whitmore is a monster who can't accept no for an answer." Jacob gripped her shoulders. "But Clara, if something happens to you, then you'll have taught me well enough that it won't." She met his eyes steadily. "I'm not the terrified woman you found 3 years ago. You made sure of that. Now let's go get Mary before those men realize they have the wrong person." Something in her tone, the absolute conviction, the steel beneath the gentleness, made Jacob nod. He turned to Tom. "Can you make it to our cabin? Sarah knows basic first aid. She'll take care of you until we get back." Tom nodded, already moving toward Ranger. "Bring her back, Jacob. Please. The baby's due any day. She can't—" "We'll bring her back," Clara promised. "I swear it." They rode hard, following tracks that were frighteningly easy to read in the fresh snow. The men hadn't expected pursuit, hadn't tried to hide their trail. After an hour of brutal riding, Jacob held up his hand, signaling a stop. Ahead, smoke rose from a small hollow, an abandoned trapper's shelter. "They've stopped to rest," Jacob murmured. "Probably think they've got plenty of time before anyone notices." His eyes met Clara's. "Can you get into position on that ridge? If shooting starts, aim for the men on the left. I'll take the right. But Clara, only shoot if there's no other choice. I'm going to try to talk them down first." Clara nodded, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She'd hunted deer, shot at targets, even killed a wolf that threatened their livestock, but shooting at a person was different. Still, the image of Mary Morrison, pregnant and terrified, gave her resolve. She took her position on the ridge while Jacob approached the shelter openly, his rifle visible but not raised. Through the scope, Clara could see 4 men, rough-looking, mercenary types, and Mary, tied to a chair near the fire, her face streaked with tears. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Jacob's voice carried clearly in the cold air. "You've got something that belongs to Tom Morrison. I'm here to take her back." The leader, a scarred man with greasy hair, laughed. "This woman's worth $500 to us." "You got $500, Mountain Man. I've got something better. The woman you're actually looking for." Clara's breath caught. What was Jacob doing? "See, you grabbed the wrong one," Jacob continued, his tone conversational. "The woman Harrison Whitmore wants has dark hair, yes, but she's shorter, younger. She's my wife, actually, and she's willing to turn herself in if you let Mary go." The lie was so smooth, so convincing, that for a moment Clara almost believed it herself. Then she understood. Jacob was buying time, creating confusion. Her finger moved to the trigger guard, ready. "Why should we believe you?" the scarred man demanded. "Because I'm offering you something better than kidnapping a pregnant woman and hoping it's the right one. Let Mary go, and I'll bring you to Clara. But if you hurt Mary or that baby, the deal's off and you'll have me to deal with instead." Jacob's voice dropped dangerously low. "And trust me when I say that's not a fight you want." The men exchanged glances. Clara could see them calculating, weighing options. Then the scarred man shook his head. "No deal. We've got this one. She's pregnant like the description said. We're not letting her go on your word." Then you've made a mistake," Jacob said quietly. Everything happened at once. Jacob's rifle came up, and Clara fired, her shot taking the leftmost man in the shoulder. Jacob's shot hit the scarred leader in the leg. The other 2 men dove for cover, returning fire, and Mary screamed, struggling against her bonds. Clara fired again, keeping the men pinned while Jacob circled around the shelter. She saw him moving like a shadow, using the trees and rocks for cover. One of the remaining men broke and ran, and Clara let him go. He was heading away from Mary, away from danger. The last man, seeing his companions down or fled, threw down his weapon and raised his hands. "Don't shoot, I surrender." Jacob was already inside the shelter, cutting Mary's bonds. "Are you hurt? Did they harm you or the baby?" Mary shook her head, sobbing. "No, just scared. Tom is Tom. He's alive, probably at my cabin by now." Jacob wrapped his coat around her shoulders. "Clara, clear!" Clara descended from the ridge, her legs shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. The scarred leader was clutching his leg, his face pale with blood loss. "You'll pay for this," he hissed. "Whitmore will... Tell Whitmore that if he sends anyone else after my wife, they won't be lucky enough to just get shot in the leg," Jacob said flatly. He turned to the surrendered man. "You're going to help your friends back to civilization, and you're going to deliver a message. Clara Bennett Thorne is under my protection. Anyone who comes for her answers to me." "Understood." The man nodded frantically. "Understood. Please just let us go." "Take them and get out of my mountains." The ride back was slower, more careful. with Mary riding double with Clara. The pregnant woman kept her arms around Clara's waist, trembling with cold and shock. "Thank you," she whispered. When they grabbed me, I thought I'd never see Tom again, never meet our baby." "You're safe now," Clara assured her. "We protect our own out here." When they finally reached Jacob's cabin, Tom burst out the door, his head bandaged, and ran to meet them. The reunion between the Morrisons made Clara's throat tight with emotion. She dismounted and found herself swaying with exhaustion, the cold ride, the adrenaline crash, and the pregnancy she hadn't yet announced all combining to drain her completely. Jacob's arm came around her waist, steadying her. "Inside. Now. You need to warm up." His voice was gruff with concern. Later, after the Morrisons had been tended to and Doc Patterson summoned, after Sarah and Daniel had been hugged and reassured, Jacob and Clara finally found themselves alone in their bedroom. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her hands still shaking slightly. "You were magnificent today," Jacob said softly, kneeling in front of her. "When you fired that first shot, I've never been more proud or more terrified. I couldn't let them take her, not when it was my past that put her in danger." Clara looked at him, tears finally falling. "Jacob, will this ever end? Will Harrison ever stop?" Today might have ended it. Jacob took her hands in his. "Those men will spread the word that coming after you means facing me. Sometimes violence, as much as I hate it, is the only language men like Whitmore understand." He paused, his brow furrowing. "But Clara, you took a terrible risk today. If something had happened to you—" "It would have happened to both of us," Clara interrupted gently, "because you would never have left me behind. That's not who we are, Jacob. We face things together. Always." He pulled her into his arms, and Clara felt the tremor run through his powerful frame, delayed fear, relief, love, all mixed together. "Promise me something," he murmured against her hair. "Promise me you'll be more careful from now on. Because I'm carrying our third child," Clara finished, placing his hand on her belly. "I was going to tell you this morning, before the shooting started." Jacob went completely still. Then he pulled back, his eyes searching her face. We're... A smile broke across his face, transforming him from dangerous mountain man to boyish joy in an instant. "Clara. Oh God, Clara." He kissed her deeply, his hands cradling her face like she was made of glass. "How long have you known?" "I suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be certain." She covered his hands with hers. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." He rested his forehead against hers. "But no more gunfights, no more dangerous rescues. Promise me." Clara laughed softly. "I promise to be as careful as mountain life allows. But Jacob, you know as well as I do that we can't predict what comes our way. Then I'll just have to make sure nothing comes our way." He kissed her again, tender and possessive all at once. "You gave me a family when I thought I'd never have one again. Every day with you is a gift I don't deserve, but will spend my life being grateful for." "We deserve each other," Clara said firmly. "Everything we've been through, everything we've overcome. We earned this happiness, Jacob. Both of us." Spring arrived with its usual dramatic flair, turning the frozen landscape into rushing streams and meadows carpeted with wildflowers. Clara's pregnancy advanced smoothly, though she grew larger faster than she had with the previous two. "Twins," Doc Patterson declared during a visit in early April. "I'd stake my reputation on it. You've got 2 heartbeats in there, Clara." The news sent the household into delighted chaos. Sarah immediately began planning how she'd help care for 2 babies, while Daniel seemed less impressed, more concerned about whether there would still be room for him. Jacob went into a building frenzy, expanding their cabin yet again, creating more space for their growing family. "We're going to need a bigger house soon," Clara said one evening, watching him work by lamplight on plans for another addition. "At this rate, we'll have our own settlement." Jacob looked up, his eyes warm. "Would that be so bad? You've always talked about creating a music school. What if we built something bigger? A place where families could come, where children could learn, where women could find refuge if they needed it." The idea took root in Clara's mind, like a seed finding fertile soil. A community, a real one, built on the principles of respect and freedom. She moved to sit beside him, studying his sketches. "Could we do it? Would people come?" "People are already coming," Jacob pointed out. "Every few months, someone finds their way to our door. Women running from bad situations, families looking for a fresh start, even men who just want to live far from civilization's rules. What if we made it official, claimed a larger parcel of land, built proper structures, created something lasting?" Over the next weeks, the dream took shape. Jacob rode to the land office and filed claims on the surrounding territory, nearly 300 acres of mountain valley with water rights and timber. He drew up plans for a main house, a schoolhouse, a barn large enough for multiple families' livestock, and several smaller cabins. Clara wrote letters to her sister Eleanor, to Doc Patterson, to the minister who'd married them, inviting them to be part of something new. By mid-May, as Clara's belly swelled impossibly large with the twins, the first families began arriving. The Morrisons came first, with their new baby daughter Grace, eager to be part of building a new community. Then came a widow named Margaret, with 3 children, fleeing creditors in Denver. A young couple, barely 20, arrived after being disowned by their families for marrying across religious lines. Each family brought skills, hope, and a willingness to work hard for a better life. Clara went into labor on a warm June evening, with half the settlement's women gathered to help. Jacob paced outside for hours, his anxiety growing with every cry he heard from within the cabin. When Doc Patterson finally emerged, exhausted but smiling, he announced, "2 healthy boys. Mother and babies are doing fine, though Clara's exhausted. You can go in now." Jacob entered to find Clara propped up on pillows, a baby in each arm, her face glowing with exhausted triumph. "Jacob, meet William and James, your sons." He approached slowly, reverently, taking in the sight of his wife and newborn sons. Both babies had dark hair like their mother and surprisingly loud voices for such tiny creatures. Jacob reached out, touching each impossibly small hand with one finger, and felt his throat close with emotion. "4 children," he said hoarsely. "Clara, we have 4 children." "We do." She smiled up at him. "Still think I was worth breaking your promise for?" Jacob leaned down carefully, mindful of the babies, and kissed her forehead. "Every single day. You didn't just give me a family, Clara. You gave me a purpose, a future. This community we're building, it's your dream as much as mine. Women finding freedom, children learning without fear, families building lives on their own terms. That's your legacy." As summer progressed, the settlement took shape with remarkable speed. The main house was completed, large enough to serve as both home and gathering place. The schoolhouse went up next, and Clara, despite her exhaustion from nursing twins, began planning lessons. Word spread about the mountain community where all were welcome, where judgment was left at the boundary line, where hard work mattered more than social standing. By August, they had 14 families. Jacob organized work crews, oversaw construction, and hunted to supplement everyone's food supplies. Clara taught music and reading in the mornings, tended her garden in the afternoons, and somehow managed to keep 4 children alive and thriving. Sarah blossomed into a capable young girl who helped care for her younger siblings with surprising maturity. Daniel, now 6, appointed himself as Jacob's shadow, learning everything he could about tracking, building, and surviving in the mountains. One evening in late summer, As the settlement gathered for a communal dinner, a tradition Clara had insisted upon to build community bonds, a rider approached. Jacob tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his rifle, but the rider held up empty hands in peace. "Message from Harrison Whitmore," the man called out, stopping well short of the gathering. "He wants you to know he's dropping his search for Clara Bennett. His wife passed away last month, and he's reconsidering his priorities." Clara stood, one hand on Jacob's arm. "His wife? I didn't know he'd married." "Married about a year after you disappeared. Young woman from Philadelphia. She took sick with fever and—" The messenger shrugged. "He asked me to tell you he's sorry, said he was wrong to pursue you, wrong about a lot of things. He's selling his interests and moving back east. You won't hear from him again." After the messenger left, Clara felt strangely deflated. 3 years of looking over her shoulder, of wondering when Harrison would strike next, and it ended with an apology delivered by proxy. "I don't know what to feel," she admitted to Jacob later as they walked along the creek that ran through their property. Relief, anger that it took another woman's death for him to see reason. "Feel whatever you need to feel," Jacob said, pulling her close. "But know that you're finally free, completely, absolutely free. No more running, no more fear. This is your home, Clara, our home, and no one can take that away." Clara leaned into his embrace, watching the sun set over the mountains that had become her sanctuary. "I was lost without my horse that day," she said softly, echoing the words from their first meeting. "Lost in every way that mattered." Jacob tightened his arms around her. "And I told you I knew the way. Turns out we found it together." 5 years later, the settlement had grown into a thriving community of 37 families. What had started as a refuge had become something more, a true town, with a general store, a proper schoolhouse, a church, and even a small clinic where Doc Patterson had taken up permanent residence. They'd named it Thornwood, after the man who'd founded it, though Jacob always insisted it should have been Clara's name on the sign. Clara stood in the schoolhouse, now a proper building with glass windows and real desks, watching her students practice their scales on the 3 pianos that had been hauled up from Denver at considerable expense. Her music school had exceeded every dream she'd harbored back in Boston. 20 children attended regularly, learning piano, violin, voice, and music theory. Several showed genuine talent that made her heart sing with pride. Sarah, now 13, helped teach the younger children. She'd inherited her mother's musical gift and her father's quiet strength, becoming a bridge between Clara's gentle instruction and the students who needed firmer guidance. Daniel, 11, had less interest in music, but excelled at mathematics, and had recently begun helping Jacob with surveying and land management. The twins, William and James, were 5-year-old tornadoes of energy who kept the entire settlement entertained with their antics. They were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief that required both parents' combined efforts to manage. Mrs. Thorne, one of her students, a shy girl named Emma, raised her hand. "Can we play the new song you wrote, the one about the mountains?" Clara smiled. She'd begun composing again, something she'd stopped doing during her years of fear and running. The music flowed from her now like water from the creek, naturally, joyfully, reflecting the life she'd built. "Of course, everyone." Turn to page 12. As the children began to play, filling the schoolhouse with music, Clara felt a presence at the door. Jacob stood there, leaning against the frame, watching with an expression of pure contentment. When the song ended and the children were dismissed for the day, he approached her. "Beautiful," he said simply, "both the music and the woman who creates it." Clara laughed, packing up her sheet music. "Flattery, Mr. Thorne?" "Truth, Mrs. Thorne." He took the papers from her hands and set them aside, then pulled her close. Do you realize it's been 8 years since I found you in that clearing? 8 years since you offered me your mother's ring and I told you I didn't need gold. 8 years of adventure, challenge, joy, and love, Clara agreed, wrapping her arms around his neck. Would you do it again, if you could go back to that moment, knowing everything that would come after? Jacob's answer was immediate. Without hesitation. You're the best decision I ever made, Clara. This life, this community, these children, it's more than I ever imagined possible. You took a lonely mountain man and gave him a world. We gave each other a world, Clara corrected. That's what partnership means. Movement outside caught their attention. A wagon approaching, carrying a young woman with a black eye and 2 frightened children. Clara and Jacob exchanged a glance. A whole conversation passing between them in a single look. Another refugee, another soul seeking safety. I'll prepare the guest cabin, Clara said, already moving toward the door. I'll talk to the husband if he comes looking, Jacob added, his tone making clear what that conversation would entail. As they walked out together to greet the newcomers, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that desperate moment in the clearing, offering her last possession for survival, to this, a thriving community built on principles of freedom, respect, and second chances. She'd been running from a forced marriage when Jacob found her. Now she helped others run toward freedom. That evening, after the new family had been settled and fed, after their own children had been tucked into bed with the usual chaos of bedtime stories and last-minute requests for water, Clara and Jacob sat on the porch of their home, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. "Mama says you saved her life," Sarah said, appearing in the doorway with her shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "That day you met, when she had no horse and no hope. She says you gave her everything." Jacob looked at his daughter, then at Clara, his expression tender. "Your mama saved me just as much. I was alive but not living. She taught me how to do both." Sarah nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer, and retreated back inside. Clara took Jacob's hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "Do you think they'll be okay?" she asked, meaning the young woman they'd taken in. "She's so frightened." "She'll heal, with time, with safety, with the knowledge that she has a choice about her life." Jacob squeezed her hand. "Just like you did. We'll help her find her way, just like we've helped all the others." "Just like you helped me find mine," Clara said softly. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd found each other in the wilderness and built something beautiful from shared trauma and mutual respect. The mountains rose around them, protective and eternal, and somewhere in the settlement someone was playing the piano, one of Clara's students, practicing late into the evening. "I love you," Clara said, simple and true. "I love you," Jacob replied, just as simply, just as truly. And in the growing darkness, with music drifting on the wind and their children safe inside, they held each other close, 2 souls who'd been lost and found their way home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Clara and Jacob's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.